Welcome to the Cinema Spotlight, hosted by James Sena. All things entertainment. Grab your popcorn and enjoy the show. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Spotlight. This is the show where we dissect all things movies, TV, and everything in between. I am your host and self-proclaimed media expert, James Sena. We have just a few episodes left in this first season of the Cinema Spotlight as we make our way toward the Academy Awards. As we prepare for that eventual conclusion to the season, we continue our crusade with another segment of the Oscar Watch. Next up will be a new segment called From Stage to Screen. And if you've been curious about movies that are newly released, stay tuned until the end for our new recurring segment, the monthly movie recap. And with that, this episode of the Cinema Spotlight is about to begin. And of course, here's an official spoiler warning for any and all content discussed here today. If you wish to skip around and avoid spoilers, you can find timestamps in the descriptions on both YouTube and Spotify for your convenience. And with that, let's shine a spotlight on Elvis.
Oscar Watch. Oscar Watch.
Now, before we begin with our Oscar Watch, let me just say, I'm sorry that this episode isn't focusing on Everything Everywhere All at Once. I know that that's what people might be waiting for me to review. Don't get me wrong, I want to watch that movie so badly. It's just that everywhere I look, I would have to pay a large sum of money to be able to watch it for some reason. So if anyone can show me where to watch it for literally like less than $5, I'm okay with paying a little bit of money, as long as it's not like the only place I could watch it I think is Amazon, and that's $25, which I will pay if need be in order to prepare for this. But I mean, I watched Elvis and that was free, so that's where we're at. But expectations and my thoughts going in. So my expectation for this movie I knew that it was a biopic of Elvis. That was about the gist of what I knew. And it took me so long to check it out because I'm not typically excited about biopics. I'm not usually keen on going to check those out in theaters specifically. I knew Austin Butler was going to be great due to all the praise he's been getting. I've been saying on a lot of recent episodes of the Cinema Spotlight that he is a front runner for the Best Actor category, but I had nothing to walk on in terms of that claim. I haven't seen it, so there was no way for me to know. So this is going to be a way to check that out. But otherwise, reviews I'd heard online before I was even doing this podcast truly stunted all my excitement because there were a lot of people that were saying that the film itself was not very good. Is that still accurate? Well, let's find out. So this movie was directed by Baz Luhrmann, which we will talk about in just a little bit here. Once we get through this little part here, I'm going to talk specifically about Baz Luhrmann and his directing style. But I digress. Austin Butler was portraying Elvis Presley. I think normally I put the roles first. Elvis Presley was played by Austin Butler. Colonel Tom Parker was played by Tom Hanks in a bigger role than I thought he was going to have, if I'm being completely honest. I was thinking he was going to be what's his name? Dickie from 42. If you know, you know. But like that's the type of role that I thought his character was going to have, and he ended up being a much bigger character than I anticipated. And then we also have Olivia DeJonge as Priscilla Presley, which you know me in my classic saying the names, mispronunciation, sorry. And trust me, there are a lot of actors in this movie, and the film focuses on these three characters the most. So those are the characters I'm going to list, but there are a lot. I believe I saw Doc Ray Montgomery in the film. I recognized him, and that was exciting because I think that he's a fantastic actor. And yeah, I mean, with that, let me just say too, for this episode, I'm actually going to hold off on a movie summary. I normally tend to have some sort of light spoiler summary going on. since there's a big conversation for this movie and a lot of Oscars, I want to make sure that it's contained enough to be able to talk about everything like that. And I do have some talking points that I feel like are super relevant to get into. But long story short, this movie is about Elvis Presley, and it shows not his birth or whatever, not like that, not that much of a biopic. It really did glorify it in a way, not like Elvis specific. Well, yes, but like this movie did it in a way where it was very flashy. This movie was very flashy in its retelling of the life of Elvis Presley, which I think worked actually for the subject matter. Now, right out of the gate, I'm going to say my rating for this movie is a 7.7. Very solid movie. I genuinely enjoyed it, and I think that it's, with the subject matter at hand, there was room for it to go wrong, and I feel like this movie, for the most part, did everything it needed to, and even in some areas really excelled. And let's talk about some of those areas. And I also realize here, too, that many of the talking points I have correspond directly to the Oscar categories. So we'll be reiterating some points here and there, but this is the Oscar watch. So that's what more do you what do you want? You know what you're getting with this segment. Now, let me just say, this movie really played into Baz Luhrmann's auteur and individual directing style. This was something I hinted at before. But Baz Luhrmann, I love his name, by the way. It's such a fun director name, if you know what I mean. He has a very specific style where he loves to... The way that I got it, the way that I felt the movie was, I felt like it was a video essay. If you've heard of it, it's basically a YouTube video, sorry, let's backtrack. A video essay is essentially an essay, but the script the essay itself is written as though it could be a script, and it is read on top of a montage of clips and images and music and stuff like that. That's what the movie felt like for a good chunk of time. I would say the second half, or the final act of the movie, strayed away from that a little bit, but that was mostly the vibe that I got for this, which I thought was very fun and interesting. Now, how did Baz Luhrmann's style seep into this movie? He loves to go above and beyond, and really, when I use the term glorification, I don't mean it like it's like over glorified or putting glory towards something that doesn't deserve it. I mean very flashy. Baz Luhrmann is very, very flashy with colors, with lights, with camera angles, with intentional cinematic choices and transitions and character imagery and all that. Very, very intentional with the way that he portrays everything and everything that you see in front of the camera. He's very intentional with everything. Not necessarily in the same way that Martin McDonagh was with Banshees of Inisherin. Not in that sort of mise-en-scene way, but everything in that you can see on film is incredibly flashy, and I think that's just his style, and it works. Another thing that he directed was The Great Gatsby, and I think for that subject matter as well, the flashier the better. I think with Elvis, you're thinking like the Vegas lights and all the different colors and huge music and imagery and all that. It all works, and it definitely adds to this movie just, sixfold. That's the word I was looking for there. One big takeaway from this film is how accurate everything looks aesthetically, and so many smaller details that were included. The way that he dances, the way that he points to the side when he's dancing, all the different specific aspects of clothing choice, hairstyling. We're going to talk about that when it comes to the Oscars. They got his looks perfectly, and I think that also just goes to Austin Butler. He was as phenomenal, if not more so, than people were claiming online. And again, we'll get to the Oscar conversation in a second, but the way that he was so intentional with everything that he was doing linguistically, with the way that he was pronouncing everything, it just really worked, and you really did think for the whole film, this is Elvis. This is him. Let's see, what else do we got here? The film term for this episode that I'm going to say, because every single Oscar watch, it seems like I try to introduce a new term to talk about. And for this one, I'm going to talk about diegetic sound. Diegetic sound is the sound for the movie coming from within the movie itself. But the diegetic sound from within the within the movie, if there's like a radio playing, that is diegetic, because that sound from the audio for the movie is coming from within the context of the story. A lot of the sound and a lot of the music, more or less, was happening diegetically. So it was happening from within the context of the movie. Not in all cases, but in enough cases, because obviously I think this makes sense, again, with a movie about Elvis. It makes sense. And this movie and its score really played into this in a way that we don't always see in cinema. It was not only effective, but it enhanced the film as a whole for me. And here's a couple of nitpicks before we get into our Oscars. I think the movie ran a bit long. Some movies are long but don't necessarily feel long, and this movie felt long. There were aspects where I was like, okay, this could be tightened up, or this could... Some of these scenes are really going on a bit. And I think it fits the style that Baz Luhrmann has, but I think in a lot of cases it really just dragged the story to be a bit longer than it should have. And here's the biggest gripe with the movie that I have, that I'll talk a little bit about here. I feel like the reveal of all of Tom Parker's wrongdoings was very awkwardly done, and let me just also have a little side thing that I wrote here for myself. I think his voice... the most of the issues that I have with this movie actually came with Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks. And listen, I love Tom Hanks as an actor. I think he's really fantastic, and he's had a lot of iconic roles in the past. This movie, I don't know if it was his choice, like his acting choice for the voice and all that. I don't know how accurate that is to the real person. I don't know, but it came off a bit exaggerated at times, whereas Austin Butler's voice for Elvis felt incredibly natural. And I think that it was irritating at times. It was genuinely irritating, and that's just unfortunate because he actually narrates a good chunk of the story, so it's a little unfortunate there. But I think that the reveal of his wrongdoings were also just poorly done. So here's the thing. Why do I think that the reveal of his wrongdoings was done poorly? And here's why. At the beginning, based on the narration, I think that we are led to... We are in the POV of Colonel Tom Parker. We're not in Elvis's point of view. We are in the point of view of Tom Parker. So, by making that choice with the story to have that as our narrative voice, it flips the script, because the point of, like, by the end of the film, we are rooting against Tom Parker. We're meant to not like him. Even the story is like, oh, he eventually got his justice or whatever for all of his wrongdoings. And it's like, well, yeah, but you made it seem like he wasn't the bad guy through most of the film. And maybe that was the active choice being made in the portrayal of the story. But I just feel like that didn't fit entirely, because of the fact that right off the gate, he was like, oh, everyone sees me as the villain, but here's the story and I'll let you decide. Making us basically feel like, oh, well, we know that he is seen as the villain, but we're also being told, well, maybe he's not. And then he goes on this narrative tirade about, well, some people say I killed Elvis, but actually it was love that killed Elvis. His love for you. And it's like, okay, yes, I get that. But like, you're like, the movie itself, it's like the movie and Tom Parker's own opinion are clashing at the end, whereas he's saying, oh, this happened, but then he's also trying to justify his own actions, whereas the movie itself is saying, actually, no, everything he did was bad, and it did screw over Elvis, and he got justice for it. So it's like, why go on this whole thing about like, well, some people say, it's like, well, no, well, some people say it because it's true. It's not wrong to say that Tom Parker was at fault for most of this. That's where I take issue with the film, because in a lot of instances, I feel like it is an untrustworthy narrator, but it's done in a way where it's more annoying, because this is a biopic. You can't have a biopic about a character, have that character not be the narrative voice, and then have the person whose voice it is misleading you. Like, that feels like a very weird and awkward choice to have, because here and there, like, in a lot of places, it does clash, and that's the main issue that I have with the film. I'm curious if people who will watch this film agree with that, or if they're like, no, but I like that choice. I personally didn't like it, but that being said, I think that doesn't take that much away from the movie as a whole because of how good Austin Butler was in the role. I feel like the movie as a whole I've very much so enjoyed. So I want to make that explicitly clear. A 7.7 is by no means a bad rating. A bad rating, if you want to look, is probably the Jurassic Park one. But anyways, Elvis was nominated for a whopping 8 Oscar categories. So let's go through them and talk about exactly, if I think it's going to win. And I'm not going to go too in detail with the other things in the categories, but just off the bat, I'm just going to tell you whether or not I think they would have a chance. Now, it was nominated for Best Picture. It was one of 10 movies nominated for Best Picture. Given the flaws, in my own opinion, on the narrative choice and the choice of the narrative voice, I guess is kind of a fun way to say that. That, for me, takes the movie out of the running for Best Picture, because I think for Best Picture, you need a movie that is mostly perfect in terms of the creative choices and decisions that were made for the movie. I disagree with some of the creative choices, therefore I wouldn't have it win. I still think Everything Everywhere, Banshees, those are better as far as the choices made. The choices made, the way that the story structure unfolds, those have much more, I was going to say hearsay, over if it should win or not. Best Actor, however, Austin Butler got a nomination, as he should, and I've been saying this whole time, it's going to be between Austin Butler, Colin Farrell, and Brendan Fraser. I haven't seen The Whale yet, so that's just going to make this even more tough. But I gotta be honest, between Austin Butler and Colin Farrell, I was thinking, oh, it's gotta be Colin Farrell, of course. After seeing Elvis, I'm sitting here scratching my head, and I'm like, Austin Butler might have this. He might have this. All 3 of them have won something. I'm gonna say that the other 2 in the category probably aren't winning, but it is such a close race. I genuinely have no idea who's gonna win. I do think that Austin Butler genuinely has a very good shot, but there's nothing confirming that. It very well could go to Colin Farrell or Brendan Fraser. That's a very, very close one. We'll know even more about that once I watch The Whale. Best Film Editing, genuinely, I think this movie should be a lock in that category. I think that should win, straight up. As I was watching it, without even knowing, I knew that it was nominated for it going in, but without even having that knowledge, I would have definitely came to the conclusion of the editing in this movie is incredible, and it is just part of Baz Luhrmann's style, I think, with the type of movie that it is. All the transitions and everything is just such a good, it's so well edited, and that goes with the vibe of the video essay. Video essays are heavily edited visually, and this movie is very heavily edited. This should be a lock to win, unless the critics think that there's too much going on, but I think it should be a lock to win. Best Cinematography, it was good. This movie had very good cinematography. Should it win that category? I mean, sure. Maybe not. I don't know. That one is going to be a bit closer, because the cinematography itself didn't wow me. I think what wowed me more so was the editing in the overall aesthetic, but I don't think that you can chalk that up to cinematography necessarily. It's good cinematography, but nothing that should blow everything else out of the water. So that's my thoughts on that. I'm going to group up these next 2 because I talked, I think, last episode, and I said, well, I don't really know much about these categories, but I did think that Elvis could have a chance. After seeing this, I think that it has a huge chance to win Best Makeup and Hairstyling and Best Costume Design. And I'm going to even say Best Hair and Makeup, I think, should be a lock for Elvis. I think it's winning that. There were a couple moments of this film where Austin Butler's appearance changed so subtly, and I was like, he looks like Elvis. He doesn't even look like Austin Butler. And I know what you're gonna say. Oh, well, that probably was Elvis. Yes, you could be right, but like what I'm talking about is they did that clip and then they would cut back to Elvis or Austin Butler. same thing, probably. But yeah, how close it was blew my mind, and I genuinely think that that should be a lock. And costume design goes for the same thing. All the subtle costume changes with the hair as well. It was so intentional, and aesthetically, this movie really hit the nail on the head. It was just chef's kiss. Best production design. I think this movie probably has a chance in production design. I don't think that there's anything in this movie that stands it that far apart, unlike the other categories I just mentioned. But I do think that it is very solid in that category. And best sound is the last one. And honestly, for best sound, it's different than best score. I think for sound, it genuinely has a solid shot at winning. Whereas if this was like best original score, I don't think so. I don't think it was. First of all, it wasn't original. It was all Elvis music, so it's not original. But the best sound, I think there's elements of that where you could definitely put that in there. A lot of crescendos in the sound of this film. And yeah, those are all the categories that Elvis was nominated for. So, do I think that it will sweep all of the categories? No, but I think it's worth noting that many of the categories this film was nominated for are very niche categories. What does that mean? It means that it doesn't have to be a critically acclaimed film to win some of these. When we're talking about things like costume design, best like hair and makeup, film editing, these aren't necessarily things that you need the best story for, which was some of my biggest gripes with the narrative choices. That has nothing to do with those other technical or aesthetic aspects of filmmaking, which I think this movie nails. So, yeah, I mean, long story short, I think the hard work of the dramaturge will be and should be recognized for their incredible work on this film. What awards do you think Elvis will win? Let me know. That's it for part 1, but if you're looking for movies that you can probably check out in theaters as we speak, you're definitely going to want to keep listening until the end. In the meantime, adjust your headphones or AirPods or whatever you're listening to as we take a quick break. What movies would you like to see me talk about on the Oscar Watch? If you're listening on Spotify, head over to YouTube and let me know in the comments below, and I will cue that movie up for a future episode. Now, let's get back to the show. About a week ago now, I went with my older sister to see a high school play. They were performing the play Rope, originally published by Patrick Hamilton in 1929, which is damn near a century ago. Now, I'm not here to critique a high school play. I'm not that evil. All right. I'm a little evil, but not that evil. I actually found the show fun to watch, and even though I love movies, I find myself enjoying live theater performances even more fun at times. That show inspired this next segment, Stage to Screen. This segment is going to be a little thing where I will discuss plays and how I think that they could be adapted into the medium of movies. And I won't lie to you, this was initially going to be paired with an Oscar watch for The Whale, because The Whale was a play and it was turned into a movie, so I thought that would be topical and fun. But we watched Elvis instead. I couldn't find where to watch The Whale. It's probably still... well, I don't know. I don't know where to watch it. But I ended up just watching Elvis instead. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Rope and how it could potentially be turned into a movie. Now, I'm just going to read from Wikipedia the plot summary. A little behind the scenes. I tried to do my own summary and I realized that I didn't remember. So, yeah, we're just gonna read it off Wikipedia. That's a little easier, right? Yeah, let's do that. That's fun. Okay. So, the play is set on the first floor of a house in Mayfair, London in 1929. The story concerns two young university students. Wyndham Brandon? Wait, what? Oh, okay. Brandon and Granillo. Those are the characters. Okay, now it's all coming back to me. Brandon calls Charles Granillo, he calls him Grano. So throughout the play, the characters are Brandon and Grano. And I'm pretty sure when I watched this high school play, they were accidentally mixing up some of the names a couple times, but that's okay. Now, those two students have murdered fellow student Ronald Kentley as an expression of their supposed intellectual superiority. At the beginning of the play, they hide Kentley's body in a chest. They proceed to host a party for his friends and family, at which the locked chest containing his corpse is used to serve a buffet. Suspicion arises among the guests as to the contents of the chest. After the party, one guest, a former professor of the murderers, returns and contrives to open the chest. He is shocked and ashamed that they would have acted in response to his own declarations of amorality. The play ends with this quandary unresolved. Now, what was any of that? Well, in a nutshell, 2 students murdered a dude. They stuffed him in a chest. They hosted a party so that I don't know why they would host the party. I think they were just mocking the people that they invited, but they were nervous about it maybe. And the whole play, it is a thriller, and the whole point of a thriller, or in this case, is the suspense of, will people find out, or will anyone else get murdered? A lot of just drama and suspense all wrapped up to create the thriller that is the play Rope. Now, how do you do a thriller on stage versus in cinema? In cinema, the thriller is my favorite genre because it plays with your mind. Horror is different from thriller in the sense that thriller is more psychological and horror is more bodily. A horror film could have thriller elements, but realistically what it's doing is it's doing blood and gore, and it's trying to scare you, whereas a thriller is trying to psych you out, if that makes sense. I hope that comparison makes sense. But how do you do that on stage? How do you do that in theater? Well, there's a couple things you could do. One, you could play with the lighting in the room, which, again, I'm not going to critique a high school play, but that was not done. That was a choice that was not made, and I think that if this is done on a larger scale like Broadway, I think that some of the tactics that they would use are lighting and sound. Those are the 2 big ones, and I think that if this were to go into film, that's how you would do it. I think you would play with the sound. There's a lot of moments where a lightning strikes, and that's supposed to be very startling. I think that there's a way to do that with the acting performances as well, being very caught off guard. I think that there needs to be more with the stakes. I think that if you're going to do this in a movie, you also need to find a way to add to the plot and figure out, okay, well, what are the stakes of people finding out? Are these students willing to kill more students in order to protect their own crimes from people finding out? These are all details that I think need to be touched upon, and I think they need to be, for the sake of the movie, I think they would need to be incorporated into it. So how else would you do a theater on stage? Well, there's lighting, there's sound. You could definitely do a lot of sound. There's a lot of moments where a phone call eerily plays. I think if you're doing this on stage, you could really work with a lot of zoom ins on characters' faces. And I think you could play with this idea of people being alone. And I think that it's very soap opera-y, but there's a couple moments where people are splitting up and you don't really know what's going on. I think that there's a lot that you can play around with the characters interacting with each other in a way where they are maybe suspicious of each other. Maybe Grano and Brandon, and they do this in the play, they do a good job of putting suspicion onto other people. The other thing to do, and I loved that the high school did this, the chest has to be front and center. It has to be right up in your face so that the people are like, okay, we know that there's something messed up about this chest because we know that bodies were stuffed in there. I'm actually not totally aware. I think, no. The audience should have been more made aware of the fact that there was a body in there. I don't think that was explicitly clear in the high school version, but I think that all needs to be front and center, and everyone, the stakes immediately, right off the bat, no one can really know. The best way to hide this is to put it in plain sight. Hide it in plain sight, which is what they do. They put the chest right out there in front of the open, and a couple times people are saying, well, why don't we just open the chest and see what's in there? Oh yeah, let's do it. Well, the key's upstairs. You want to go get the key? Sure. So they're playing around with the suspense. And I think that thriller means more than just spooking, which is why it's different from horror. I think especially in this context, thriller is just Thriller is so unique because when you're playing with suspense, you could watch a movie like Argo, for example. If you haven't seen Argo, Argo is not a horror movie. Would I call it a thriller? Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's a drama, and there's a lot of suspense. A movie that derives a lot of its impact from the suspense that it's building. That, to me, is a thriller. This should be a thriller, not based on because it's scary. It should make the people watching being like, oh my god, what's going to happen? Is he going to get the chest? Oh my goodness, is that person going to die? Oh, they're getting separated. He has a gun. Oh, he has a gun. Is he going to use it? All these different elements should be feeding into it. And, well, with that being said, let's move on to a little side note that I discovered while doing research for this. I didn't realize that there actually is a movie version for Rope. I checked it out after I finished reading the summary and everything like that. And I didn't realize that not only was it turned into a movie, it was turned into a movie by none other than Alfred Hitchcock in 1948, I believe was the year. I am very intrigued by this, so I'm going to go and probably watch this after I'm done recording, but without having seen that film, how would I do this film in the modern day? And I think that this actually, and I'll wrap off this segment by talking about how would the thriller genre change with the times? How is it different from when Hitchcock did thriller to how we would do thriller in the modern day? So, I'll give you my quick opinion on that. Alfred Hitchcock was very good at suspense. And I think the way that he was able to do it was he was able to really create the stakes. And I feel like in a lot of these videos I talk about stakes, and that for me, just as a film student, is something I've really been paying attention to when I watch movies, is what are the stakes of this story? What are the consequences of the actions? If you're watching a movie like Rear Window, a movie that is basically completely filmed through the lens of Jimmy Stewart from a window with binoculars. What makes that movie suspenseful? It's not knowing who is safe, and it is understanding the consequences and really, really hoping from the audience that those consequences are not made, or that they're not reached, I guess you could say. If the lady is across the street sneaking through apartments, and you're checking up and making sure she's okay on your binoculars, and you see someone entering the house on the other side of the room, the audience watching is going to be filled with dread of, oh my god, please don't get caught, please don't get caught, don't get caught, don't get caught. And that, to me, is really masterfully done by Hitchcock. However, does modern cinema treat it the same way? I think there are similar elements. I think that modern modern cinema does a good job of creating stakes. In some cases, there's some movies where it's a little bit phoned in, but the stakes are created and the suspense is heightened through the use of CGI, special effects, sound, and lighting. Those are the best ways to create suspense within a scene. Suspense is an emotion that can be brought out that is different than a lot of these other films, like, romantic films, or, rom-coms, musicals, comedies, horror films. They all give you a certain type of reaction, but suspense, that idea of clinging to the edge of your seat, is the most important part of a thriller, where you're like, oh, no, please don't. It really plays with your mind and saying, okay, subverting expectations and all that. Just a real jittery way to fucking say that. But yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that Rope would be a fantastic watch to, or something that could be revisited in the modern day, because I would be so curious what you could do with that in the setting of, with more time, maybe a really big cast of actors, even adding on to the story, fleshing it out a little bit more, really heightening those stakes. Any opportunity to talk about my favorite genres, I will gladly take. And Alfred Hitchcock is just that guy. So let me know if you want to hear me talk about other theater plays in this way, because there's so much theater that goes unrespected, because there's a lot of people that don't really care about theater. They don't really go, and they don't get it in that way. I've been a huge theater fan for the last 6 or 7 years at this point. And a lot of times where even if I don't think the play is going to be that good, I will go because I'm so curious about the story and how it's presented on stage. When you're on stage, it's a whole different medium. You are playing to an audience. The audience is part of the show. If you're on camera, it's a little bit different. You know, if you're a character on stage and you're suspicious of someone, you can look out menacingly out into the audience. Whereas on film, you have to do that to the camera, and not always does it have the same effect. So I think it's super interesting, and there's a lot of plays where you could talk to in this context. So let me know if you want to hear my take on more of these plays being brought into the world of film, because I think that there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of these to have really good there's one that comes to mind, and that is, I believe it's called Rabbit Hole. There's a play, I did a project on that in school. It's very good. Let's see. There are also a bunch that are, I think it's True West, I think is one, where it's two brothers. I believe that was made into a film at one point. There's a lot of potential here with a lot of these films, and we're in a world right now where a lot of cinema feels stale, because what we're doing is we're taking the same movies that already exist, and we're either redoing movies that exist, or we're just doing sequels and stuff. We're in the world of sequels now. So why not do more adaptations from stories that many people may not have seen? So by taking that from books, I think is one aspect. Taking it from comics and visual novels, I think is another one. Doing it from plays where the script is already there, shorter, hour-long to hour and 30-minute movies, I think is a genius way in order to bring theater to the public audience. So that's my personal take on that. And you can go down in the comments and suggest different plays that if you want me to take a look at them, if I haven't read them already, and maybe talk about how they would be brought into the film medium. You can go ahead and do that while we take a second to queue up the final part. We'll be right back. If you are enjoying the show so far, remember to check out the Cinema Spotlight Spotify playlist and subscribe to keep up with future episodes. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, so I rarely mislead you here on the Cinema Spotlight, so allow me to explain myself here for a second. I was going to do a monthly recap of all the movies that came out in January this year, then make it into a thing moving forward where every month I would recap the movies that came out, which I could technically still do. However, I pride myself on making content, and by extension, coming up with segments that I myself would personally watch. And let me just say, I haven't seen anything that has actually come out in January. And to be honest, while doing research, I was scratching my head saying, like, I don't know if in good faith I could recommend any of this stuff and have anything worthwhile to talk about. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get caught up, and I'm going to blind react to what was released in January and February. It might just be me shit talking, but let's be real, folks. This time of year is the time to watch Oscar-nominated movies in preparation for the Oscars, which is what I've been doing, or binge watching TV shows. And I haven't seen The Last of Us, but that's one that I've heard is really popular right now. A lot of people are talking about it. So let's end this show today with some fun banter and playful criticism on what 2023 has had to offer so far. So if you're sitting there in your chair saying, you know, this guy's been doing a lot of Oscar watching, that's a lot of Oscar stuff, that's all this guy talks about. Well, here is my chance to show you why that's the case. So, okay, first thing on the agenda is I'm going to scroll through, and I believe it's either 10 or is it, yeah, it looks like I have 10 movies here that did come out in January, just to show you the level of, you know, material that we're working with here. I'm gonna lean into my chair here and just sort of get comfy and talk about this stuff. So here's some of the movies that came out in January. none of which I have seen, if I'm being honest here. Teen Wolf, the movie, which I heard does not have Dylan O'Brien in it, which I hadn't even seen that much Teen Wolf. I think I saw like a handful of episodes. The fact that Dylan O'Brien is not in it, I think really hurts it for me because if I'm not mistaken, Styles was like, I think that's his name, or Giles. No, Styles. Styles was one of the more important characters in the story. So him not being in it was like, I'm not seeing it. Shotgun Wedding. Barely heard of it when I saw this, but I also heard it was nothing special. I think it's Josh Duhamel, I think, is in it, which, to be honest, is not enough to draw me in to see it. You People, which I believe was a movie that was made by, I think that was Jonah Hill, which I was actually curious about, but I've also seen a lot of really bad reviews. So maybe that's something I would check out in my free time eventually, but I'm not going to go out of my way to see it. If you've seen any of these, by the way, let me know if I'm completely just talking crap for no reason, or, because the next one coming out is one I was genuinely interested in, and that's Skidmarink, which is, let me say that slower, Skidamarink. I mean, it's a horror movie. That's the thing. The Pale Blue Eyes, which I think did that have Christian Bale in it, or was that? It might have had Christian Bale in it. If it's got Christian Bale, it makes me curious. But recently, this year was not a great year for Christian Bale, if I'm being completely honest. Love and Thunder was a miss, and if I'm pretty sure this was him, not a noteworthy performance, and just not a very memorable movie at all. A movie called Plane came out, which I think had like Gerard Butler, maybe. Again, just another brain dead action movie, which you can go see with your family if you just need if you want explosions and action scenes. That's what that is. A Man Called Otto, another example of Tom Hanks potentially phoning in, based on what I'm hearing, phoning in a performance. I don't know. I feel like I'm being very hard on Tom Hanks, but I just feel like recently, and can someone disagree with me and just put me in my place if I'm completely out of line here? Does it feel like Tom Hanks just isn't really delivering the way that he used to recently? I don't know. That's just my thought, but hopefully I'm just wrong. There's a movie called Sick, which I actually heard was not that bad, but I think it's a horror movie. I'm not actually sure. I'm just listing the movies at this point. Megan, I did hear about. That was a popular, wasn't it? Megan? That was a movie, that was a horror movie that maybe critically wasn't crazy beloved, but I think when people went to go see it, they actually was like, oh wow, Megan. Yo, goddamn, Megan. Another movie, Missing. So this is actually a big month for niche horror films. If you're a horror movie fanatic and you like stuff like that, some of these movies actually in the these top 3 or 4 might actually be up your alley. Missing, I heard, was very good, and I believe this is a horror film that was done almost to benefit quarantine. I believe this was done like over the computer, over a Skype call or something like that. I do believe, and I actually heard good things about it. Genuinely might go check this out if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't think it's going to win any awards, but at the very least, I am a horror movie fan. This could be a fun watch with your friends if you're curious. And then the last one's Infinity Pool, which I think is a movie that is part of a trilogy with horror movies X and Pearl, I think. I don't know enough about it, but it has Mia Goth in it, I believe. So if you're into that sort of thing and you've seen those other movies, maybe you should go check that out. Maybe it'll be pretty good. Who knows? So those are some January movies that are potentially noteworthy. What's to be expected for the rest of February? Well, actually, hold on. Before I get into that, I just want to show you and read out to you movies that are at my local theater, because I think that'd be fun. There's a movie called Marlowe, which I believe just came out today. And that is, well, Google had it listed as it came out in 2022, but then it also was released in theaters February 15th. So that's today. And I've also heard that the reviews are completely awful. So, and I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, is that Liam Neeson? It is. Wow. For Liam Neeson alone, I might check it out. But I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? It is a thriller. So, can I put my money where my mouth is? Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I heard that wasn't good. It also pisses me off that this movie exists, if I'm being completely honest. Winnie the Pooh is the most wholesome If you actually, you know what's better? Okay, if you are thinking about watching Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, join me in my boycott of this movie. I am not going to see this. You know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to watch 500 or 600 times the Winnie the Pooh movie that came out in like 2011, because that movie is great. It has the line that the infamous line of "I cannot not." That's adorable. That's what Winnie the Pooh is all about. Next, just we got Magic Mike's Last Dance. I mean, you know what? Okay, maybe I'll check that out. I don't no, I don't know. We'll see. Normally maybe it wouldn't draw me in, but who's to say? Who's to say? Next, Titanic's 25th anniversary. Didn't realize that was even the case. Apparently it's remastered. I don't know if this is just my theater that's doing this, but it is the 25th anniversary. So for all of you Titanic fans, Titanic fanatics, sorry, I won't do that ever again, but you can go check that out if you're curious, I guess. 80 for Brady. Very topical with the Super Bowl. If you've seen the Super Bowl, let me just say, I think that final holding call was a little bit BS, but you know what? I've also seen people saying that, like, that is something regularly that you could get called for. It's just the fact that why would you call that? Anyways, I'm not going to talk about the Super Bowl. I'm talking about 80 for Brady. We got Sally Fields. And we got to relive the 2017 Super Bowl. So that was... Anyways, Knock at the Cabin is one that I'm genuinely interested in. This came out, I believe, in February, so this is a big one. I'm curious, genuinely curious. It is a M. Night Shyamalan movie, I think. So that might be one I check out. In theaters, maybe not, but, you know, on HBO when it eventually comes out. We got Missing at my local theater. Plane, which I think I had just talked about. That's still at my local theater. Megan, A Man Called Otto. Puss in Boots' Last Wish. Ooh, maybe I should see that before it leaves theaters. That could be a fun time. I'll bring my Twizzlers and maybe a Charleston Chew. Avatar: The Way of Water, which, I'm going to be honest, I just don't have a desire to see. Maybe at some point I will watch it, but there's something about it. Maybe the length of the movie itself, I don't know. I just don't feel drawn to watch it. I didn't love the first one either, so it's kind of like, maybe I'll watch it. I probably will at some point, but not in theaters. And then there's something here, the Metropolitan Opera, La Traviata Encore. That's fun. No idea what that means, but sure. And now, what are some movies coming out in the rest of February? Well, Marlowe came out today, a wide release, I guess. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, okay, that came out today. The opera thing, Special Engagement, okay, I don't know what that means, but if you're curious where I'm looking this up, there's a website called thenumbers.com, and that's where I'm looking up everything that is going to get released in February. So, very, very soon, on tomorrow, Eating Miss Campbell is going to get a limited theater release. The 17th, we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, which I am personally very excited for. I don't normally talk about Marvel movies here on this show, but hey, I mean, I think it's going to be a fun watch, so I'm going to probably go check that out. And I'm a huge Ant-Man fan, so anyways. Limited release of a movie called 88. We got a limited re-release of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I recommend if you haven't seen that. I actually think it's a great film. Devil's Peak, limited release. Emily, limited release. Hidden Blade, limited release. All these are limited, so I can save myself the words. Integrity of Joseph Chambers, Lonesome, Of an Age, Pacifiction, Return to Sheol, Suzhou River, probably butchered that. The Confession Musical, ooh, that's fun. Whoa, but that's on the 24th. Everyone's favorite bear, Cocaine Bear, that's coming out to theaters. Make sure to pre-order your tickets now for that. Jesus Revolution. You know what? Honestly, it's kind of interesting that the three next movies are Cocaine Bear, Jesus Revolution, and then followed by My Happy Ending. I feel like those three should just be grouped into one, just one watch party. I don't know. Those titles crack me up. Okay. We also got limited release for Ambush, Bunker, Give Me Pity, God's Time, Juniper, Linoleum, which I might see just because linoleum's a fun word to say. Luther, Mummies, The Quiet Girl, The Sorrow and the Pity. So that's what's coming out in February. As you can see, not a lot of huge projects immediately for this year, which is fine. I don't think, again, this time of year is normally on the slower side. So, some of these are fun. I mean, Cocaine Bear I think will be one that people talk about online, not because it's good, but because the concept is kind of silly. And I've also heard that they're considering making spin-offs for that, which that idea in and of itself is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that's what this year has so far. But it's good that we're staying up to date on all of this. I'm going to check out some of these, I think. I mean, definitely Ant-Man. I might check out Skinamarink. And I feel like I actually might check out Missing. Though those all look actually pretty good. But let me know if you've seen any of these films and what you think of them. We'll continue our Oscar nomination binge for the next episode. And who knows, maybe I'll even start up a binge of movies that have been on my need to watch list, which could be something maybe for the next episode. Hint, hint, teaser, teaser. One thing is for sure, I'm having a blast with this, and I don't know about you, but that's what cinema is all about. I want to thank everyone for listening to the Cinema Spotlight. If you enjoyed, please leave a like on the video and give the show a rating on Spotify. And if you could take a moment to subscribe to the show, I would really appreciate it. Follow me on Instagram at SenaJames35 for updates on when new episodes get released. If you want to let me know what movies to check out, head over to YouTube and drop a comment or two. That's all I got. Stay classy, friends.